Less than an hour ago, Bitcoin just finished the weekly close. It just finished the Sunday session. It has now begun the Monday session, and it is surging once again. I talked about the RSI. I'm going to show you the RSI, the daily time frame. I've talked about the divergence. Very well could not be done yet, and we've talked about going higher to our target levels in the weekly time frame. We're doing that at this time. I want to continue to point out my signals continue to remain bullish in the weekly and the daily time frame. The Bitcoin trend remains bullish from the time when it bounced off of the 100 period in the daily time frame, not seen here, but at that time it bounced off the 100 period. It formed that bullish divergence I talked about. Again, we've had a risk-on environment since then, and Bitcoin, the Bitcoin trend has been positive. The Bitcoin risk model remains bullish, and Bitcoin remains in a positive trend and in a risk-on environment. Again, it's likely going to end up getting a larger divergence, as I've been talking about on that RSI. Don't think it's done. We're now pushing to new highs here. Coin had dropped below 100,000, got back above it. Again, it's likely going to form a larger divergence with risk on. All is said and done. Now, Bitcoin for the Saturday session was pretty much flat here. It got a candle of indecision in the form of a doji on the Saturday session. That was down just a fraction percentage-wise, and then we got a rally on Sunday of 3%, closing at 3%. And then here, as we now start the Monday session, as we're less than an hour into it, we're now up 1.23%, so just under 1.25% for Bitcoin. We were a little bit higher a little bit ago, starting out that Monday session, but again, we'll be watching to see. We're moving towards the linear target that I've been talking about. Again, we had this beautiful triangle set up on Bitcoin. Again, key support, this horizontal support. We broke above resistance. It acted as support here. 9% sell-off. We bounced just above our 20 period, the blue line there, and we went sideways and we formed this triangle. We had that first push, the first initial push above 100,000 right there, and we rallied above the previous day by nearly 5%. We turned down that very same day, and we ended up dropping from the high almost 11.25%. We rebounded back up and closed back above the 20, back above the 10, back above the lower boundary of the triangle. Candle of indecision. We continued on. We got a lower high, and then we back tested the trend line yet again. Got a little bit of a push below it with some bottoming tails below the 20 period moving average of blue line again briefly, and then again late last week on December 11th. That was the day of the CPI. We got that rally. The stock market got a big rally. The next day, the PPI came in hot, the hot inflation data. Both the stock market and Bitcoin pulled back. And then here, the rally resumed on Friday. We were up 1.37% there on Friday. Again, flat Saturday. Big 3% rally there on the Sunday session, and continuing to build upon that here up over 1% as we start off the Monday session. So again, horizontal support, the triangle, the breakout, the back test, and again the 10, the red line remains above the 20. They're still pointing higher. And again, I talked about that divergence not being done yet on the RSI daily time frame. My signals remain bullish in the daily time frame. Momentum is bullish, and our weekly signals continue to be bullish for Bitcoin. I told you we had a divergence that did complete here, a divergence, and then it turned into a triple divergence, but I told you it may not be done yet because we still might plow on through this trend line right here, which we are now doing with the Sunday session. Again, that is the divergence line excluding the shadow right there with this peak on the RSI, that lower high. But I told you it may not be done yet, and I told you I didn't think it was, that we could still go higher. And again, I've talked about the 115,000 area on the log scaling. I've talked about that 108, 109, 107,000 range, right in there for the linear. I'll show you the chart depending on how long it takes to come into contact with those trend lines. But right here, I talked about in my last update, I talked about that this may not be done yet because, again, if we bounce off the 50 level on the RSI, which we did do, we held above it, and this trend line, look at the trend line that we're bouncing off of here. And again, this trend line goes back to the 49,000 low made there in August. And look at that, we bounced off that trend line beautifully. And I told you we might have a divergence, but it might form a multiple point divergence. This divergence gave us the 9% sell-off. We bounced off support. We saw the breakout of the triangle. We tested that level again. And again, now we're pushing up through this trend line right here, which is the divergence between this simple divergence right here, and that gave us the triple divergence. It might be that the divergence, as I've said, is not done, and it looks like that's going to be correct. So again, I'll be watching if we can continue to go higher. Now, again, as I've said, Bitcoin might form a brand new divergence on the daily chart before all is said and done, and on the 60 or on the 4-hour chart. Watching, or we can build upon the one over here with these extremes. Look at that beautiful bounce off the trend line and the 50 level. As long as we hold above 50. Now, when we tested the 100 period, that's this pink line, and the 50 period is a green line. When we tested these levels, and the signal said we were going to pull back at that time, we did test them. Look what happened. We got back above the 200 period, back a bounce off the 100 and the 50, and the RSI went back into positive territory. And again, the pullback right here was our back test of the broken trend line right here. And again, I told you we were going to go to new highs. Here we didn't quite make it. We were a couple $100 under the peak there from March earlier in the year. Because we went above the resistance zone, I told you we were going to go make new highs. Be watching to see if we can clear 77,000. If we did, we would go much higher. We did have a successful breakout and back test. My signals remain bullish. Notice we're holding above the moving averages. We're bouncing off the momentum cloud, and the RSI got back into positive territory. It pulled back right here. And again, that was the back test of that trend line, and it remained in the positive region above 50 there on the RSI. In order for Bitcoin to reverse, it would have to break the trend line and break below the 50 level. So again, we can get a brand new divergence now, or want to try to go to 115,000 or so, or just under it. Stall at the linear trend line, then again, we might form a divergence sooner rather than later, because we're climbing up towards that area. But we did get above this trend line, which I told you I thought was going to happen. We did bounce off of this trend line with the RSI, which I told you I thought was going to happen. And I think that's forming this bearish divergence with the MACD. Look at the MACD. It's curling back up now with this breakout above this trend line right here. So again, I think you're going to see the MACD come back up here. You're going to see a divergence develop here. See that surrounding the Fed or the holidays. Again, we're going to be going into Christmas and New Year's, and see very, very light trading volume, but still end up forming this divergence at some of the levels I've talked about. And again, Bitcoin very well could reach the log scaling target and overthrow the linear target, but we're right now moving towards that linear target, which is the first immediate target above our current level of resistance. And let me show you the weekly chart. Bitcoin's moving closer towards this trend line that I've been talking about in the linear time frame, or with the linear scaling, I should say, in the weekly time frame. The trend line, I told you, depending on when we come into contact with it, if we hit it sooner, a couple weeks ago, it would have been, around 105, 106. Now it's taken us up towards 107, 108, 109 if we reach it here in the near future. So I'm watching this trend line directly overhead. We're looking at the 107,000 400 or 500 area or so, maybe 200. So about 107,200 to 500 range, that lower end of the 107,000 area. If we take our time reaching it, again, it can go up to if we do it over a couple weeks here, over the holidays, then it can go, on up to 108,000 or 9,000. Now, we may just plow on through it, and if we do plow on through the trend line, then we can go up higher, above that, moving towards the log scaling trend line in the weekly time frame. But this is a trend line I've had my eye on. I've talked about it in nearly every single video. This from the 2017 peak right here, the two peaks in 2021, excluding the shadow right there, and then tagging the shadow right here, and it's pointing up to levels just directly overhead. So that is our linear scaling target here in the weekly time frame, where we could run into some resistance. If we overthrow it, and we may overthrow it and then get like some kind of topping tail reversal just above it, but we can overthrow it on a closing basis in the weekly time frame and stay above it. Again, we've got that other log scaling trend line that I've been watching, the channel, which is where I think we're likely headed. Listen carefully, we very well could overthrow this trend line, because again, I think you could move towards the 115,000 area on Bitcoin, which again, right around that 115,000 area, just under, depending on when we come into contact with the log scaling trend line, is the channel, the upper channel line. So I think we can bypass this trend line and still reach the target level I've been talking about, moving towards 111 to 115,000 or so. If we take our time reaching the upper channel line, we could go as high as 120,000 on Bitcoin. Now let me show you that log scaling I'm talking about. Now, so far we've stalled at this trend line right here. Now we've gotten above the one from the two peaks in 2021. We got above that trend line. That actually acted as support here in the weekly time frame. But the low that separates those two peaks, the low of 2021 and the higher low in 2022, excluding the shadows, points right up to the levels where we've been stalling. And right now, if we can clear this area, then we can move up to the upper channel line. I told you I think that is a very strong possibility, but then we can stall around the 115,000 area or just under it, give or take, when we come into contact with the trend line. Now, if I bring it up close here in the weekly time frame, you see here the breakout here of this trend line. You can see the push above 69,000, the red line right there, and it's taken us up here to these two trend lines. This trend line, again, is from that 2021 low that separates those two 2021 peaks on Bitcoin. So if we can decisively clear this level, and I think you got a good shot that you're going to do that, then I think that upper channel line comes into play. I've been showing you in every single video. Let me show it to you now. Now, remember, my signals remain bullish in the weekly time frame with our breakout over here, and we saw momentum turn bullish after we reached 52,000 in the weekly time frame. And so we have the trend and momentum bullish. If we can clear the trend line from the 2021 low right here, directly overhead, you have this upper channel that I've been talking about here in the weekly time frame for Bitcoin. I think you got a good shot that that's where we're likely headed. Once we start seeing signals begin to turn bearish daily time frame, and if that happens, we can get a sell-off. As long as the weekly signals remain bullish, you still got a very good shot of reaching this level and going higher on Bitcoin. So if we can clear the trend line right here, this trend line right here, from that 2021 low, then I think you're going to go just a little bit higher on into this trend line right here that could take us towards 115,000. If we take a little bit longer to reach it, it could go as high as 120,000. But I'll be watching this trend line, and I think you got a good shot of reaching it if we can clear this trend line right here, which we're attempting to do with the Sunday rally of 3% and trying to continue that on into Monday. Can we continue it with the Fed meeting next week? Can we continue on the holiday trading? We'll be watching. But again, you got a pretty good shot that prices could stall out there as the channel, the upper boundary of the channel, is tested. Now, if we just look at the channel by itself and remove the trend line from the 2021 low, again, you can see a really nice looking channel here. And again, I'm connecting the lows over here, slightly excluding the shadow, and the parallel boundary is right here, and then slightly excluding the shadow over here to the topping process there in March. And we've got a really nice looking channel directly overhead. Now again, this could take us to the 115,000 area, maybe High as 120,000 if we take our time reaching it, but I'm looking, the trend line is the target. Numbers are just where it might come into play if we reach it sooner or if we reach it later. The trend line is the target. Now, it's what's interesting, I talked about it in my last video. Again, I'm looking for the S&P to rise up to the upper channel line and reach this level 2. Now, I just did a video on the recession. We just got this last week, we got the uninverting of the yield curve between the 10-year and the 3-month. Now, happens right before recession hits. Goes through, and I show you what happened surrounding the bursting of the tech bubble back in 2000 and 2001 and the financial crisis in 2007 and 2008. What happened when this signal occurred? Recession quickly followed within just a few months. Both cases. That is the case if this recession signal is going to be correct. It's a very reliable recession indicator. We could see a top with Bitcoin surrounding this trend line right here. Certainly possible. So just something to consider, this trend line right here as we're getting close to recession. Now again, you're going to see a recession in the first quarter or the second quarter of 2025. I think you got a good shot it's going to happen in the first quarter. If that's the case, the stock market could peak. I want you to go watch the video that I'm linking at the end of this video. If you haven't watched it already, I posted it on my stock channel, my stock market channel. This is information you absolutely need to know. What happens to the stock market? What happens to the economy when this signal takes place? And a recession is what happens. The stock market will price that in. Bitcoin will price that in. People do not want to hear that. It's the conventional wisdom is, oh, we're having the soft landing out of the Fed. We're not going to have a recession. Bitcoin has never been through a real recession before. We started to get one in 2020, and it didn't last at all because huge government intervention and the Fed intervening. They don't have the same luxury of doing that right now. They created the inflation that we now have. Doing all the stuff that they did. QE is inflationary. The stimulus checks, that was inflationary. If we go through a recession, this will be the real first recession that Bitcoin has gone to. And also, each time the stock market has experienced a bear market, well, Bitcoin is in existence. We had a bear market in 2022. No, that was not a bear market. That was a major correction. Stock market. Just some things to ponder. Now, Bitcoin did drop 78%. The bear markets, the previous bear markets were over 80 to 90%. We've had 3 of them. And then whatever this ends up being, it was a 78.5% drop. But just a trend line I'm watching here on Bitcoin, I think we're likely going to reach it. Again, that could take us to the 115,000, maybe as high as 120 if we take our time reaching it over the holidays or if the drags out into January. We could see a delay in selling because of taxes for the stock market and for Bitcoin. Certainly possible, a delay on into the new year. Now, I want to continue to point out that the rally has not produced any kind of distribution signal for Bitcoin whatsoever. And again, we very well could reach that upper channel line before we get one. Even the 9% sell-off that we had with Bitcoin to create the triangle, it didn't produce any kind of distribution in the weekly time frame. We got the distribution over here as a bull flag formed, but so far the accumulation signal down at 52,000 continues to dominate. There are no other distribution signals, just that accumulation signal that has been followed by this big rally, which is likely a blow-off top for Bitcoin. Just some things to be watching. We're going to reach that level here in the weekly time frame. If we can clear that resistance in the weekly time frame, I'll be showing you, again, I still think we're going to reach that upper channel eventually, whether we pull back and then go there or whether we try to reach it immediately and bust up through this level, we'll be watching. Right now, Bitcoin has the possibility of forming another 13 count and another 9 count. The last one just kind of gave us a sideways kind of a pullback. But these counts have been interesting. They show price exhaustion, and the 9 counts up here have marked some turning points. Not perfect, but again, they show price exhaustion, and a lot of times you get a divergence that develops. These other 9 counts, sometimes they mark exact bottoms, other times they don't. They've come fairly close. We had one here that was just a pullback. Over here, it was just a pullback. So again, we're going to get one here very soon. All likelihood, something I'm paying attention to with Bitcoin in the daily time frame. At the moment, we're trying to bust up through the resistance level. You'll see that if you the video all the way through, the resistance level in the weekly time frame and the trend line in the daily time frame. Then, as we are just a little bit further along early on in the session, we're seeing some selling there. I'll be watching to see how do we close, but right now we're getting a 12 of a 13 count, which means that next week, or this week now that we've just now started with Bitcoin, we very well could see the 13 count complete. We have a 4 of a 9. Again, Bitcoin can be manipulated very easily surrounding the holidays. So I'll be watching, does the 13 count complete? Does the 9 count complete? If it does, you got a shot at Bitcoin reaching the trend lines with the linear scaling. We're just below it. Going higher, if we clear the log scaling trend line I've been talking about and going up to that long upper boundary of the channel near 115,000, if we take our time reaching it, Bitcoin might go as high as 120,000. Line's a target. Watch the video all the way through. You'll see it. But I'll be watching what happens here. Do we stall or do we bust up through those trend lines? You got to clear those trend lines or reach that upper channel. Or do we pull back and then try to do it in January? We'll be watching. Good shot. You're going to try to reach that upper channel here in December or on into January. Watch the video all the way through and you'll see what I'm talking about. Weekly signals remain bullish for Bitcoin. Now it's a power weekly chart, still positive. The critical mass line still bullish, still pointing higher, and our rainbow cloud still bullish. Again, we saw the signals flip back to bullish. Breakout prior to that, momentum signals were bullish. The weekly time frame signals remain bullish in the weekly time frame. As long as my weekly signals remain bullish, coin can go higher. But I am watching that upper boundary. If we can clear the trend line in the weekly time frame we've stalled at, trying to clear it Sunday in the Monday session, and if we can clear it and continue, you can go to that upper channel line I've been talking about. Watch the video all the way through. Please support the channel with the link directly below that allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like charts, you like the indicators, let me know that by supporting the channel today. The link, it'll take you to a secured site. Do that, I thank you. You can do what you can to help out. I would really, really appreciate it. Have any sponsors, just a direct relationship with you. They contact me. I turn those offers down because I don't want to sell you things. I just ask that you partner with me and support the channel. Thank you for your consideration for that. Again, daily signals. The trend remains bullish. I told you that, again, we could form a larger divergence on my oscillators. I think that that is the case. We had this one divergence that gave us the 9% sell-off. But again, we formed a triangle continuation pattern, and we're resuming the advance. Now we're stalling at the resistance in the weekly time frame. If we're trying to clear it over the last session there on Sunday and continuing that on Monday, if we can clear that resistance in the weekly time frame, again, we can go up to the upper channel lines on the linear and the log scaling that I've been talking about. The video all the way through, you'll see those. I think we end up getting a larger divergence on my oscillators on the RSI in the daily time frame and things like momentum. We can stall around the trend line from the 2021 low, still pull back, and then reach it later. This drags out into January on into the new year. If we just surge and we reach it immediately, see the trend line. We've got to be able to clear. We've got to be able to clear this trend line from the 2021 low if we're going to continue the advance. If we get a reaction here, then again, we still may reach it. May drag out into the new year. Bitcoin's got a really good shot of reaching that level by December or January. I think it's really got a pretty good shot of doing that. Bitcoin, to clear that weekly resistance, we need to hold above the upper Bollinger Band here and keep going if we're going to clear it. If we stall at the upper Bollinger Band and turn back down, then again, we may see some kind of pullback before going higher. But I think you're eventually going to reach that level. Again, right here, the Sunday bar is giving us a breakout above this level here. We've tried to clear it. Now we are. So again, we're challenging that weekly resistance level from the 2021 lows, creating the two peaks from 2021. Balance of power positive in the daily. Trend signals are bullish. And we have the momentum line having Bearish with the triangle, it remains bullish. See if the bulls this week with the Fed can clear that trend line of resistance in the weekly time frame. Watch the video all the way through and you'll see it. Bitcoin's got to be able to clear the cloud here in the daily time frame to resume the advance and then clear the trend line in the weekly time frame. Here in the daily time frame, the ribbon remains bullish for momentum, but we are struggling to get above the cloud. We're trying to do it right now here starting the Monday session. So again, if we can clear this level, you can clear the trend line in the weekly time frame from the 2021 low, then again, that would be a very positive sign and a very bullish event. Is do we pull back and then go up to that upper channel line, or do we do it right here, right now, immediately with the Fed or surrounding the holidays? We'll be watching that. Weekly signals continue to be bullish, but we've got to be able to clear this trend line from the 2021 low for the advance to resume. We're trying to do it. Tried ever so slightly with the close of the Sunday bar, and now as we move on into Monday, we'll be watching. Do we get rejection here and a sell-off, or do we clear this level and go to the upper channel line in the weekly time frame, which you'll see in this video?